Okay, this week, some of the biggest names in TV, both on screen and behind the scenes, went to Canberra with the begging bowl out. Their aim was to showcase the value of free-to-air television and lobby decision makers on a range of topics. To find out what they want and whether they're likely to get it, I'm joined by Tim Burrowes from Umbrella and Unmade, who was at the event. Tim, welcome back to McKnight Tonight.
Rob McKnight, my apologies for not even having made the bed. If I'd known you were coming, I'd have made more preparations.
I was going to say he's travelled all the way from the bed to the bed. That's right. Once this interview's over, you can get your wine because it is Tipsy Thursday and you can get back in the bed.
Oh, look, mate, I must confess, I have another media commitment, actually. One of the, it's off the record, so I probably shouldn't say who, but yeah, one of the platforms are doing something, a dinner for the media tonight. So yes, there's a lot of lobbying going on this week, Rob.
Very special. It's funny how they don't invite me to these dinners. Hey, let's go to this event on Tuesday. Tell me about it. It was held on Tuesday night. What was the event and what was involved?
Yeah, this was described as a parliamentary showcase. It was all about trying to promote the power of the networks and the positive contribution that the free-to-air networks make to Australia. So that was ostensibly the soft power, the lobbying, but of course they came along with something of a, I don't know if we call it a shopping list or a laundry list, but a list of asks for the government. And of course, it was a chance for the government to show their appreciation. So we had the bosses of all of the TV networks.
Sounds like a love fest. In fact, you did take a photo of the leaflet, and we've got a graphic here of it. This is the leaflet that the networks had at Free TV had at this event. Now, the agenda of what Free TV was asking for, I want to jump straight to number 4, if I may. Advertising restrictions must be balanced and impact on broadcasters must be mitigated. Now, one of the issues this relates to is a proposed restriction on gambling advertising. And it seems to me, Tim, like they've already had a win of sorts on that one because a proposed inquiry has been shelved. It certainly hasn't made proponents of the gambling advertising restrictions happy. Have a look at what Green Senator Hanson-Young said this morning in Parliament.
Both the Labor Party and the Coalition have gotten together today to stop the interactive gambling bill going to an inquiry because they do not want this issue debated. Shame. I don't know what has happened between the Peter Murphy report recommendations being handed down and today that has made the Liberal Party and the Labor Party so scared of the gambling lobby. So scared of the gambling companies, so scared to do anything that was recommended by that Peter Murphy report that said the single most important thing you could do is to stop the advertising of this harmful product.
Now, stopping advertising, gambling advertising, would have a big impact on the TV industry that's already struggling financially. Maybe their words had an impact.
Yeah, look, there's definitely been something afoot in recent months, for several months, because the inquiry that Sarah Hanson-Young was referring to that was led by the late Peter Murphy, that came out with cross-platform support for widespread reform that would have effectively seen most forms, if not all forms, of betting advertising outlawed over time. Now, that seemed to be gradually watered down, and the legislation never happened prior to the previous election. And then there's just been this sort of drumbeats ever since that maybe only certain forms of advertising would be banned or certain hours, and there was great speculation about why that would be. From the broadcasters, one of the drumbeats for them was wanting certainty, but obviously the main drumbeat was not wanting it ruled out at all. Now, one of the kind of thoughts I have is there's a very big NRL deal to be done,
yes,
TV rights deal in the coming months, and arguably NRL is probably looking for maybe $1 billion a year or something approaching that from the TV networks. Now, one of the calculations that all of the people bidding, and as well as the TV networks, it will probably be at least some of the streamers, is what they can bring in advertising against
Of course.
them. And that includes betting advertising. Now, I suspect that the most effective lobbying being done at the moment is actually not so much by the TV networks as by the sporting codes, because they will want the networks and the streamers bidding with some form of confidence that they're going to be able to bring things in from all categories. So I have a hunch that the very influential lobbying machine of the sporting codes, possibly
Makes
including
sense.
NRL, are also behind this, because I think overall for the broadcasters, if this was ruled out as a category, in time they would find that this is a level playing field again, because when they next come to bid for rights, if it's 7 versus 9 versus 10, for instance, they all know what they can afford to bid. And if they know they don't have betting advertising as one of those streams of revenue, then they bid a little bit less accordingly. So it corrects in time. So it's always felt to me like a slightly fallacious argument to try and propose that it shouldn't be banned because it will hurt the networks. Because in the long term, it kind of resettles what the rights are actually worth. So
I disagree with you on that one. Through these points, I've got definitive views on whether I agree or disagree with them. I am against a gambling ban. It's legal. You know, if gambling is a problem, outlaw it. It's these things in this country where I understand that it's had impacts on families and I understand all that, but it's still legal. And so a legal entity should be able to advertise, and it should be able to advertise in sporting events, in my opinion. And I think taking that away would have a huge
like
financial
the smoking
impact.
companies used to back in the day, Rob.
Sorry, mate, what was that? I was still talking while you were speaking.
Sorry, we have the lag all the way to Sydney and back. I was saying that your argument, and I respect your argument, but it does sound a lot like the argument that the tobacco companies used to make. Here we have,
and I understand, but it's not the 80s where television was the only platform where there was money to be spent. You got rid of tobacco, but there were so many other ways to make revenue. We have seen revenue go into television diminish big time because of the streamers. They're now having advertising and all of social media. The advertising dollar doesn't go as far as it used to.
No, I totally accept that. But your argument that the reason it should be allowed is because it's a legal product. You know, we already have the precedent that the legal product of
but I don't agree with that either. I think if it's wrong, outlaw it.
So you would have been in favour of... We should still have smoking ads on today. Hey, look, some of the most creative advertising in the world was smoking ads. So there's a tiny part of me that would love to see the creativity of the advertising industry, even if obviously there might be the slightly sad consequence that thousands and millions of people might die early.
I actually think it's a better world without smoking advertising. But I have problems when we ban things that are legal. If they're that bad, ban them.
I think the thing is, though, some of those betting ads, you can't help but think when you see them, this would be a better world without them.
All right. I know you've got to get to your dinner, so let's move on. Let's go back to point one. Abolish the outdated commercial broadcasting tax. The broadcasters are paying $50 million annually for the right to broadcast across the nation. Do they have a point on this one?
I would... I will answer your question, but I'll start with another question as well, which is even now the free-to-air broadcasters are able to write somewhere between $3 and $4 billion a year in advertising. That's via what they're doing over the public airwaves. So, my question is: these are public airwaves. If these broadcasters didn't have access to them, other people potentially would. So there must
that spectrum is worth millions, if not billions. If television closed down tomorrow and the government sold it off, they would make so much money from that spectrum.
Absolutely, the telcos would jump in. Now, we did see a system in the UK for a while that licenses were limited to, I think it was 10 years, and then at the renewal, it would become an auction. So, of course, the networks had to reach certain standards, effectively have quotas of number of hours and years and everything else. But I guess my slightly tongue-in-cheek provocation is if the networks feel that the value of a license should be zero, then why not put it out to market, and anybody who's willing to deliver a news service, deliver drama, deliver sport against all of those quotas of the hours, then let's see who bids the most. Generally they're quite in favour of capitalism, so I would be intrigued to see how that one would go. But on the same point, I'm very sympathetic to their argument that they provide a lot of services that the digital platforms do not. So
yes, but the digital platforms don't have that access to that free spectrum. I think you and I are on the same page. So it's one where you're wrong and one where you're right. The one that you agree with me, you're right when you're with McKnight. So you've got 1 point so far. All right, this is going to go on forever. Point 2 covers sporting rights. They want to close the digital rights loophole in the anti-siphoning rules to stop global streamers putting iconic sporting events exclusively behind a paywall. Now, I agree with this one, but that last line is a furphy because the sports on the anti-siphoning list would still have to be shown on free-to-air TV. They just wouldn't have automatic rights to the digital rights. Now, I do think the TV station should have rights to the digital rights when they buy the free-to-air rights, but what they're saying there isn't quite true.
Yeah, I think my understanding that the legislation might be slightly different to that. My understanding is that if, say, a Netflix picked up all of the rights and then ran it only on Netflix and there was never a TV arrangement, they would be allowed to do that.
That's not my understanding of the legislation.
Yeah, no, I think the problem the networks have with it is that this is what could happen. So what they were arguing for is that there should still be a protection for them to go on free to air, and this is their problem with the previous legislation, that it hasn't allowed for the event, at this stage unlikely, but the eventuality that one day a streamer might decide that, valuable as these rights are, they only want to lock them up. Now, if you think about the practicalities of, say,
which makes sense,
NRL. Yeah, let's use the example of NRL. It costs you $1 billion a year. Now, if you're Netflix, you arguably can't monetize that, even with your advertising tier. So it only works with on-selling those rights to, or partnering on those rights with a TV broadcaster. So that was the theory.
Who have told me, I've had an executive pretty senior tell me that without the digital rights, sporting rights are useless these days.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, totally agree. We saw that, for instance, one of the things Seven struggled with their previous AFL and cricket rights, for instance,
correct,
was when they only had broadcast, they were not as valuable. Now they have both, and they've had to pay for that, but it makes it more valuable to the advertisers and the sponsors.
Now, I hate to challenge you on anything, but I have a memory of Patrick Delaney at Fox Sports doing the case for them being able to have all the rights for getting the anti-siphoning list if they offered it for free. So it may be an interpretation, but
that's very true. That's a very good point. Now, I don't think the legislation covers it, but that would be a very interesting argument, wouldn't it? Would be if they're, well, I suppose that's the thing, is if they're giving it away for free. Now, the question becomes, if you're streaming on KO, that's one thing, which is obviously owned by Foxtel. But the moment it broadcasts on Foxtel over the satellite, that then falls within the legislation. So that's where it becomes very interesting. And let me, well, now that you mentioned Foxtel, I'll float one other really intriguing theory, which is what happened. What could happen with the NRL if, rather than next time round, Foxtel bids alongside Nine? What if they just partner with the ABC? They give the ABC, and it would have to be one.
And that's a theory I've heard.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's an interesting. interesting theory. Now, what that would mean is at the moment, probably Foxtel pays 2/3 of the costs, and 7 or 9, depending whether it's AFL or NRL, pays the other third. And the ABC probably would pay almost nothing towards it.
Well, take a Netflix. If Netflix brought the rights, they could just give it to the ABC for next to nothing just to meet the anti-siphoning, what I believe is still part of the anti-siphoning legislation.
My understanding is they won't even need to do that, because so long as it doesn't go on television at all, my understanding is that they're not. There are no restrictions. You know,
we might have to meet up again, because I'm not convinced on it. But I know you're a very smart man, so I hate to challenge you.
This is why it's on the laundry list of what. That's why it's on the list of the 5 things they're asking for. That's why they're asking for it to be revised.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, let's move to point 3, because you have to get to this dinner, and we're taking up a lot of your time. They're asking for urgent support of regional television. What are they after here?
No, I think one of the things where the networks have a really good point is broadcasting to the regions is incredibly expensive. You know, there's less advertising available. The infrastructure costs are as big. And just because some of the quirks around how the licenses work can make that really impractical. So that one absolutely feels like a really reasonable ask if we do want to have this policy of Australia being a country where we work hard not to disadvantage those of us who don't live in the 5 capital states.
Okay, so that's another one we agree on. So you've got 2 points. You've got one against, and you've got one that's in question.
I'm really going to need to toss a coin on.
It's all going to come down to this point. Point 5, the final point. It's very interesting and something new. I haven't heard this one before. They want to introduce a news production offset to support investment in and delivery of this vital community service for Australians. I could be open to this. What do you reckon?
I think it's really interesting. Now, I've got to declare a massive conflict of interest, because through Mumbrella and Unmade, I employ journalists. So clearly a policy that would create a tax advantage for every journalism job, as this could be, depending how you define it, is something which is in my interest. So please take that declaration of interest.
You've made the declaration.
Yeah, and the argument against for the public purse is this does mean these companies paying less tax effectively, so that's a hit on the public purse. But one of the reasons I think it might just get a little bit of traction is because politically you're not actually giving money to these networks. They're just not having to pay as much. And politically it also avoids the potential alternative, which is what the government has called the news bargaining incentive. And this was effectively saying to the digital platforms, we are going to put a levy on you unless you go away and do some deals with these organisations, and we'll reduce the levy you pay based on those deals.
Which I have a major problem with. It strikes me as dumbfounding that news organisations who use Facebook and X and to promote their products, to get people to click on a story, to get them back to their website, it gets me that Facebook Meta should have to pay for that privilege. I don't understand the thinking.
Yeah, look, that particular principle logically doesn't make an awful lot of sense. Two things about the potential of the digital levy. One is, well, yes, should or shouldn't that money go to the news providers, and that I certainly have my question mark about. But
and also, lest we forget that on your Medialand podcast on the ABC, which I ran in Media McKnight, we had Chris Jantz saying, it just went to shareholders and paying down debt. It didn't actually get reinvested in journalism.
Yeah, that's right. Chris Jantz being a former Nine executive. The bigger issue, though, is that as it exists with the platforms at the moment, they get to offshore most of their profits because they don't book it as local revenue. You know, so when somebody buys an ad on Facebook or on Google,
that's right,
it's generally bought out of, I think it's Ireland, somewhere overseas anyway, in a low taxation regime. So Australia does not get a slice of these tax dollars, despite them being local customers they're doing deals with, often with a local sales team as well. So that is a massive leak going on from Australia's tax base. Now, that needs to be plugged, and if that's the digital levy, if that's how it's done, then for me, that feels like good policy. Where it becomes more of a kind of picking winners is if they can actually get a discount on this levy just by giving the money to the news providers instead.
Which is what happens when news was taken off Facebook, Mumbrella, TV, Black Box all got taken down, but we haven't seen I don't know, I'm assuming you haven't seen a cent from the news media bargaining incentive or code, whatever you want to call it. Yeah,
no, that's absolutely right. So it was all about picking winners. So that's
it was a payoff.
Yeah, so that's the flaw in it, that the alternative of the offset might make it a little bit fairer than this thing of, you know, Facebook and Google choosing the big guys that they want to do deals with. And I think the big question on that levy though is this was proposed before Donald Trump came to power, and all of a sudden levies are political dynamite.
Well, I did say it would be a 10-minute interview. We've been going for something like 20 minutes. But just before we go, the PM at this event you were at got up and made a speech. You ran a very interesting grab on your Mumbrella podcast. Let's have a listen.
So my message to you is simply this: thank you, and that my government has your back. We will not give in to some of the platforms when the pressure comes on, which it will.
That's a pretty powerful statement from the Prime Minister. What do you think he means by it? Just how far will he go, Tim?
Well, certainly the signal he wanted to give in the room to those TV company CEOs was, we've picked a side, and the side we've picked is the local team. Now, we've obviously seen a lot of conflict recently, including the age-gating legislation. Finally, the decision being taken that it would include YouTube after all. So that's put the owner of YouTube, Google, offside. But equally, it's 18 months since Meta said it was going to stop playing within the news media bargaining code framework. It's 9 months since the government vaguely said it would do the news bargaining incentive. And sometimes actions or lack of actions speak louder than words.
True. All right, Tim Burrowes from Unmade and Mumbrella. Get off to your dinner. Enjoy your secret little political dinners. Thanks for joining us on McKnight Tonight.
Thank you, Rob. Always a pleasure and never a chore.
Fun, insightful interviews from a washed-up producer with nothing to lose.